Hi, this is Tom Vander Ark from Getting Smart. Today we're visiting with David Ruff, and joining me is Bonnie Latham, our PBL expert. Hi, David.
Hi, David.
How are you two doing today?
We're great. We heard you had a great design institute this week.
Yeah, we had about 150 educators from across New England gathered in Groton, Connecticut. We really went through a bunch of design thinking with them to try to spur their ideas to think about how could we fundamentally reshape education. And folks did a great job. A lot of really thoughtful ideas that were flying around the room, and then they were able to actually take those and coalesce those into some real solid strategies that they're looking to implement.
That's exciting. David, you lead the most interesting and I think important network of secondary schools in the country, really focused on proficiency-based learning. Bonnie and I are writing a paper on blended humanities. So I wanted to ask you if there was any talk at your conversation about blended, integrated, project-based humanities.
Actually, there was people looking at blended approaches, integrated approaches, project-based approaches, not just in humanities, but in multiple areas that were there. I think there's a lot of people who are breaking out of some of the, some of the structures we have around content areas and saying, this is a science effort, this is a math effort, this is an English effort, and looking and being practical and saying the real world actually blends all those pieces and integrates all those pieces. Certainly, people are looking at online options and where those things might connect, and looking at the various blended options that are there. I think the notion of blended as opposed to strictly online is really much more of an attractive piece for most of the folks who are there, although I think people's minds are open to however they can get kids to learn best.
David, you probably have the largest network of secondary schools thinking about proficiency-based learning. It seems that one of the potential downsides of proficiency or competency-based learning is sort of turning standards into a sub-skill checklist, and that would be going the opposite direction of integrating and project-based learning. Do you see that?
It certainly is a slippery slope, and something that we've seen schools slide down that slope problematically. I think a key piece is figuring out how many standards you're going to hold kids accountable for achieving. And Tom, as you know, in the 76 schools that are in the League of Innovative Schools, coming from across New England, we certainly have some schools that are just doing a bang-up job, some schools that aren't doing as well on that. I think they're all committed and working in that way. But you've seen the kind of the framework that we've established there with a small number of cross-cutting standards, a small number of standards within the content area that is supported by performance indicators, so there's more of those. But it's crucial that we not say to kids, all these learning targets and all these performance indicators are a required accountability piece for your learning. Because if we go to that level, we will get into the checklist. I got this one, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. Right. And our big fear is that doing little bit by little bit by little bit does not actually add up to something big. It adds up to little bits. And so by having these larger, broader, more thoughtful standards, kids can integrate their work, kids can understand their work, they can think big ideas. I mean, I'm very nervous that we could end up thinking just, how do I punctuate well as opposed to how do I write well?
Yeah, that's a great point. So it sounds like it takes leadership, real instructional leadership, to encourage this sort of one, the prioritization that you talked about, and two, opportunities for integration across typically siloed subjects.
Well, I think there are a number of things that are important. Certainly, school level leadership is always a crucial piece in anything you're trying to do. I mean, anybody who argues against that, I would argue really hasn't taken a good look at our system that's there. And so we've got to have principals and teacher leaders who are really thinking about how to improve instructional quality. I mean, a proficiency-based system in a poorly taught school, if using poor instructional strategies, is not going to get us very far. It's not the kind of magic button that's all of a sudden going to make everything better if our instructional quality isn't very good. But it does enable instructional strategies to expand, to integrate, to be more holistic, and to engage kids at a deeper level. I would add, I think there's a big piece here that sometimes goes, is forgotten in all this, that setting the right policy context is crucial. And so if if the state policy context says we're going to look at all the small pieces, we're going to have assessments that get at all those small pieces, we're going to have accountability pieces that get at all those small pieces, we're going to have state standards that do that, and then we hope that kids are going to be manipulating and thinking big ideas and integrating and actually applying their learning, then we're hoping for something that's probably not going to happen. And it's only through Herculean efforts from individuals can we get that way.
Right.
We've really got to set the policy context, set the public will context, set the practice context in order to make this work.
So specifically, that means state standards, assessments, and accountability. You know, what are we really holding people accountable for?
Well, what are we holding people accountable for? And I think at the core of that is what are we holding kids accountable for learning? And if the system is set up on all the small pieces, then our chances of getting to success are limited. And we fall into the notion that you've pointed out of kind of a checklist that happens there.
So, David, what are some practical tips that schools could use to encourage writing across the curriculum?
Well, certainly, I think you've got to get clear about what you mean by quality writing. You've got to state that, and you've got to have some assessment strategies that are going to get you at quality. And you've got to have the opportunity for teachers to be able to share student work to look at that. And so, if your sense of what quality writing, my sense of quality writing may be different. The only way we're going to actually come together on that is by looking at student work and talking about it. And pushing each other on.
How do you make quality writing everybody's job, not just the English teacher's job?
I think that is a hard step, because I think there are a lot of teachers who are concerned that their writing ability isn't as good as it should be. I think it's through sharing the work. One of the things that we do see that is helpful, however, is that I don't know, there's a pressure here between saying it's going to be about writing, we're going to really focus our energy on that, as opposed to focusing on multiple areas. So if I'm a science teacher and you say we're going to focus on writing, I have a hard time seeing where my piece is in that. If I'm a math teacher, I have a hard time seeing my pieces on that. But I think you can legitimately argue improving math performance is something that should go across multiple areas, not just writing going across multiple areas.
Right.
If we go with math, now as the math teacher, I see, oh, a piece of what I hold to be near and dear also is seen by others as being important to spread across. And so I think it's important that everybody sees a piece of their work as being integral to the whole.
What about big projects that would integrate across the traditional disciplines? How do you encourage that?
Well, again, if you start from the point of view of standards, you can go to big projects pretty easily. If the commonalities you're looking at are the curriculum, then you're going to stay with the curriculum. It's not going to go anywhere. If you look and say our commonalities that we're looking at are the standards, and the larger standards we're looking at, then when an opportunity, something happens in the news, something happens locally that you can actually incorporate into your instruction, you can jump on that and go there with that. There are a number of schools that I know that are explicitly moving towards a project-based learning approach.
Right.
I would say not all of our schools are there, not all of our schools are ready for that, but I think that they see a value.
What about big blocks? Do you have schools that are integrating math and science and integrating English, social studies?
I mean, the question is what's big. I mean, the vast majority of our schools have gone to longer blocks. They're in the 80, 90, 100-minute blocks that are there.
Do they still subject?
There's a lot of integration of social studies and English, and there's a fair amount of integration of math and science. There's limited integration across those two areas, with the English getting integrated with science that we're seeing. But I think people are seeing a value in that and wanting to do that. It's coming.
Are all these things easier to do in middle school? The integration, writing across the curriculum, project-based learning?
I don't think so. I don't think it's easier in the middle school than the high school. You know, certainly at the high school level, I think one of the things that does happen is, you know, the public, we're pretty accepting of what happens K-8 in terms of not worrying about it. But there's a piece when it gets to high school, you know, is my kid going to get into college, starts to jump into the picture there. But I don't think it's, we haven't seen it being more difficult to do integration at the high school level than it is at the middle school level. I mean, I think it's more on a case-by-case basis.
Are there ways that you're seeing technology help in this space? Easier to improve writing, easier to promote integration?
Certainly, technology is a huge assist here, and I don't actually see how you could talk about personalizing learning without incorporating technology. I just don't see it happening. That's both in terms of the instructional strategies, the learning strategies, and the management of what's happening there is got to be incorporated in that. Having said that, our experience is an interesting one. When we see kids get technology and teachers start to integrate that into their classrooms, at least the first couple of years, a lot of what they're doing is what they would have done anyway. It's just a little fancier, it's a little quicker, but at its core, it's not a whole lot different. Most of the things they were doing, they could have done without the technology. It's only once the teachers start to get more comfortable with it, students get more comfortable with it, and a bunch of the glitches, because almost inevitably you don't have wireless coverage everywhere, the system breaks down, or it's not robust enough. But it takes a couple years to get through that. Do we actually start to see kids and teachers doing things that they were not able to do without technology prior to
that? David Ruff, New England Secondary School Consortium, we appreciate your work. It's really, in a lot of respects, sort of creating a path for secondary schools nationwide. So we appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. Take care.
David.